The late afternoon sun painted the riverside in shades of amber and gold, casting dancing reflections across the water's gentle current. Marcus Wellington, at 34 years old, had everything the world believed money could buy. A business empire worth billions, penthouses in 3 countries, and respect that commanded attention in every boardroom he entered. But none of that mattered as much as the giggling 2-year-old boy clutching his finger with tiny, determined hands. "Dada, Dada, look," little Ethan squealed, pointing at a family of ducks gliding across the water's surface. Marcus knelt down to his son's eye level, his expensive suit jacket abandoned on the park bench behind them, his usually perfectly styled dark hair ruffled by the breeze. "I see them, buddy. Those are mallards." "Can you say mallard?" "Mallard," Ethan attempted, before dissolving into peals of laughter that made Marcus's heart swell with a love so profound it sometimes frightened him. Being a single father hadn't been part of Marcus's carefully constructed life plan. When Ethan's mother, his ex-wife, had chosen her career and freedom over motherhood just 8 months after Ethan was born, Marcus had been thrust into a world of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the terrifying realization that all his money and power meant nothing when it came to soothing a crying infant at 3 in the morning. But he wouldn't trade it for anything. "Shall we skip some stones?" Marcus suggested, reaching for a smooth, flat pebble near the water's edge. The Riverside Park was relatively quiet this Wednesday afternoon. Most people were still at work, which was exactly why Marcus had cleared his schedule. His assistant had protested that he had 3 important meetings, but Marcus had learned the hard way that his son's childhood wouldn't wait for quarterly reports. Ethan clapped his hands together. "Skip. Skip." Marcus demonstrated, sending the stone dancing across the water once, twice, 3 times before it sank. Ethan was entranced, immediately bending down to grab his own stone, his chubby toddler legs slightly unsteady on the sloping riverbank. "Careful, son," Marcus cautioned, reaching out a protective hand. The bank wasn't particularly steep here, but the water was deeper than it looked, and the current, while appearing gentle, had a deceptive strength. Ethan's little fingers closed around a stone almost too big for his hand. He pulled back his arm with exaggerated concentration, his face scrunched in determination that reminded Marcus so much of himself. But as Ethan released the stone, his foot slipped on a patch of wet mud. Everything happened in horrible slow motion. Marcus lunged forward, his hand outstretched, fingers grasping at air as Ethan tumbled forward with a surprised cry. The splash seemed impossibly loud, and then his son was in the water, his small head going under almost immediately. "Ethan!" Marcus's scream tore from his throat as he scrambled down the bank, his dress shoes sliding on the mud. The current was faster than he'd realized, and Ethan's small body was already being pulled downstream, his arms flailing, his face appearing above water only to disappear again beneath the murky surface. Marcus hit the water running, the cold shock of it stealing his breath, but panic drove him forward. He was a strong swimmer, had been on the swim team in college, but the riverbed was uneven, and his expensive leather shoes filled with water, weighing him down. He kicked them off desperately, his eyes never leaving the spot where his son had just gone under again. "Somebody help. My son," he shouted to the park at large, though he could see no one nearby. His arms cut through the water with powerful strokes, but the current was fighting him, and Ethan was so small, so vulnerable, and the water was so dark Marcus couldn't see him anymore. Terror unlike anything he'd ever experienced seized his heart. In boardrooms he was confident, commanding. But here, in this river, watching his son disappear beneath the surface, Marcus Wellington felt utterly, devastatingly helpless. Meanwhile, further upstream along the riverside path, Sarah Chun was walking slowly, carefully, her entire world bundled in a soft pink blanket against her chest. Maya, just 3 weeks old, was asleep in the baby carrier, her tiny rosebud mouth making small sucking motions even in sleep. Sarah's feet ached, her lower back throbbed, and her bank account held exactly $47 until her next paycheck in 5 days. But as she looked down at her daughter's perfect, peaceful face, she felt overwhelmed with a fierce love that made all the struggles worthwhile. Being a single mother hadn't been her plan either. When she discovered she was pregnant, her boyfriend of 2 years had made his priorities clear by packing his bags and leaving a note on the kitchen counter. No forwarding address. No second thoughts. Just gone. The past few months had been the hardest of Sarah's life. Working at the diner up until her 8th month of pregnancy, coming home to an empty apartment, assembling the second-hand crib alone while tears streamed down her face. The birth had been difficult, and now, 3 weeks later, she was still recovering, still adjusting, still figuring out how to be everything her daughter needed. The walk was doctor's orders, gentle exercise to aid recovery, and the riverside park was her refuge. Here, away from the cramped studio apartment that smelled of old cooking and damp, she could breathe. She could imagine a better future for Maya, one where they weren't counting pennies and wearing thrift store clothes. A scream shattered the peaceful afternoon. Sarah's head snapped up, her body immediately tensing protectively around her daughter. About 50 yards downstream, she could see a man in the water, fully clothed, moving frantically. His voice carried across the distance, raw with panic. "My son. Please, somebody." Her nurse's training, she'd been a pediatric nurse before the pregnancy forced her to leave her job, kicked in immediately. Her eyes scanned the water, searching, and then she saw it. A small splash, a flash of bright blue clothing, tiny arms breaking the surface before disappearing again. A child. Drowning. Sarah's mind raced. The man was trying to reach the child but was struggling against the current. Every second counted. Without the current's help, he might not reach the child in time. She looked down at Maya, sleeping peacefully against her chest, oblivious to the crisis unfolding. She looked back at the drowning child. The choice should have been impossible. She had a newborn who needed her, who depended entirely on her for survival. She was still healing from childbirth, her body not fully her own yet. The water was cold, the current dangerous. But she was also a mother. And somewhere in that river was someone else's baby, dying. Sarah's hands moved with practiced efficiency born of necessity and 3 weeks of constant practice. She unbuckled the baby carrier and gently, so gently, transferred her sleeping daughter to the soft grass beneath a nearby tree, tucking the blanket around her, positioning her in the recovery position she'd learned in nursing school. "Mama will be right back, sweet girl," she whispered, her voice breaking. I promise I'll come back to you." Then Sarah Chun, 3 weeks postpartum, exhausted, broke, and terrified, ran toward the river's edge and dove into the water without a second's hesitation. The cold water hit Sarah like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs and making every muscle in her body seize in protest. Her incision site, still tender from the C-section that had brought Maya into the world, screamed in agony as she pushed through the surface, but she forced herself to move. Somewhere ahead of her, a child was drowning. Her eyes stung as she searched the murky water. She'd positioned herself upstream from where she'd last seen the small figure, letting the current work with her rather than against her. The man, the father, she assumed, was still fighting his way toward the spot where his son had gone under, but he was too far away, and every second the current pulled the child further from his desperate reach. There. A flash of blue fabric, small arms no longer fighting, just drifting. Sarah's heart lurched.
She knew what that meant.
The child had stopped struggling. She dove under, ignoring the burning in her healing body, ignoring everything except the small form now visible in the deeper water. The current had pulled him into a section where the river ran faster, deeper. Her lungs burned as she kicked downward, her arms outstretched. Her fingers brushed soft hair, then found purchase on fabric. She grabbed the child's shirt and pulled him to her chest, kicking hard for the surface. He was so small, so terrifyingly limp in her arms. They broke through the surface together, and Sarah immediately tilted the boy's head back, checking for breathing even as she struggled to keep them both afloat. His lips were blue, his eyes closed. No breath. No cough. "I've got him," she screamed toward the man still swimming toward them. "I've got him, but he's not breathing." The shore was closer than the man was, and every second counted. Sarah wrapped one arm around the small body and used the other to swim with the current toward the bank, letting the water help her rather than fighting it. Her nursing training took over, her mind clicking through protocols even as her body worked on autopilot. Unresponsive child, approximately 2 years old, submersion in freshwater, unknown duration underwater, not breathing. She reached the muddy bank and hauled herself out, her arms shaking with effort as she laid the child on his back on the grass. Water poured from his mouth and nose. His small chest was still. Sarah positioned herself beside him, tilted his head back gently to open the airway, and began infant CPR without hesitation. 30 chest compressions, using only 2 fingers on his tiny sternum, counting aloud to keep herself focused. 1, 2, 3, 4. Behind her, she could hear splashing, heavy breathing, the man emerging from the water, but she didn't look up. Couldn't look up. Her entire world had narrowed to this small boy, his blue lips, his silent chest. After 30 compressions, she sealed her mouth over his nose and mouth, so small like Maya's God, so small, and gave 2 gentle rescue breaths, watching for the chest rise that would indicate air entering his lungs. Nothing. "Come on, baby," she whispered.
"Come on.
"Breathe for me." 30 more compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The man dropped to his knees beside her, his face ashen, his entire body shaking. "Ethan." "Oh God, Ethan, please." "Sir, I need you to call 911, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "Tell them we have a pediatric drowning victim, approximately 2 years old, CPR in progress. Give them our exact location."
"Can you do that?"
He stared at her for a fraction of a second, then fumbled for his phone with shaking hands. Sarah gave 2 more rescue breaths, returned to compressions. Her arms burned, her surgical site felt like it was tearing open, but she kept going. She'd done this before in the hospital on crash carts, on practice dummies, but never like this. Never on a real child, alone, on the muddy grass beside a river, while her own newborn daughter lay sleeping under a tree 20 yards away. "Come on, sweetheart. Your daddy needs you. Come back. Come back to us." She was about to start another round of compressions when the boy suddenly convulsed. Water spewed from his mouth, and then he was coughing, choking, gasping for air that sounded like the most beautiful music Sarah had ever heard. "That's it. That's it. Baby, breathe." Sarah quickly turned him on his side in the recovery position as he vomited up more river water, his small body racked with coughs. But he was breathing. His chest was rising and falling, his lips already losing some of their blue tinge. The man, Ethan's father, let out a sound that was half sob, half prayer.
"Ethan.
Ethan, buddy, Daddy's here. I'm here." Sarah kept her hand on the boy's back, monitoring his breathing, checking his pulse at his small wrist. Fast but strong. "Good. That was good. He needs to get to a hospital immediately, she said. Secondary drowning is a real risk, and his oxygen levels. The ambulance is coming, the man said, his voice rough. His hand hovered over his son, as if afraid to touch him. They said 5 minutes. God, 5 minutes. Will he? His pulse is strong. He's breathing on his own. Those are good signs, Sarah said, her professional calm a shield against her own shaking hands. But he needs proper medical evaluation. Dry drowning can occur hours after submersion. They'll need to monitor his oxygen levels, check for water in his lungs, possibly do chest x-rays. The boy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Data. The man's face crumpled. He reached out and gently touched his son's wet hair. I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. You're okay. You're going to be okay. Sarah sat back on her heels, adrenaline still flooding her system, making her hands shake now that the immediate crisis had passed. She'd done it. The child was alive. Breathing. The relief was so overwhelming, she felt dizzy. And then she remembered. Maya. Sarah's head whipped around to where she'd left her daughter. The bundle of pink blanket was still there, and even from this distance, she could hear the beginning of a cry, that distinctive newborn wail that meant her daughter was waking up, wanting to be held, to be fed, to have her mother close. Sarah tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Her legs wouldn't hold her. The post-delivery weakness she'd been carefully managing for 3 weeks had been pushed far beyond its limits. Her vision swam. Whoa, easy. The man, she still didn't know his name, reached out to steady her. You're hurt. You're bleeding. Sarah looked down and saw he was right. Blood was seeping through her shirt where her incision had partially reopened. She pressed her hand against it automatically. I'm fine. I just need to get to my daughter. That's your baby? Over there? His eyes widened. You have a newborn and you jumped into the river too. His voice broke. You saved my son's life. Anyone would have done the same, Sarah said, but her legs still wouldn't cooperate. Maya's cries were growing more insistent, and Sarah's breasts were already responding, beginning to leak milk, her body trained by 3 weeks of constant demand to respond to her daughter's needs. Let me, the man said, and before Sarah could protest, he was running toward the tree where Maya lay crying. She watched, her heart in her throat, as this stranger bent down and gently, so gently, picked up her daughter, supporting her head with careful practice that spoke of experience. He brought Maya back to her, and Sarah reached up with shaking arms to take her baby, to press her close, to breathe in that perfect newborn smell and assure herself that Maya was safe, that she hadn't abandoned her, that her impossible choice hadn't cost her everything. I'm so sorry, sweet girl, Sarah whispered into Maya's downy hair. Mama's here. I'm here. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. Ethan was sitting up now, still coughing occasionally, but his color was improving with each breath. His father kept one hand on his back, as if afraid to let him go even for a second. The man looked at Sarah, really looked at her for the first time. She knew what he saw, a young woman in thrift store jeans and a worn sweater now soaked and muddy, blood seeping through the fabric, holding a newborn baby and shaking with exhaustion and shock. She looked like what she was, someone barely holding it together. What's your name? He asked softly. Sarah. Sarah Chun. Marcus Wellington, he said. And this is Ethan. I don't know how to thank you. I don't have words for what you just did. You saved my son's life, and you have a newborn and you're hurt, and his voice cracked. You could have died. You both could have died. Sarah looked down at Maya, now calming in her arms, and then at little Ethan, breathing and alive when minutes ago he'd been still and blue. I'm a mother, she said simply. What else could I do? The ambulance pulled into the park, followed closely by a police car. Paramedics jumped out, rushing toward them with bags and equipment. As they descended on the scene, checking Ethan first, then turning to Sarah and her obvious injuries, Marcus Wellington didn't move from his son's side. But his eyes kept returning to Sarah, to the woman who had given everything, risked everything, to save a child she didn't know. Neither of them realized it yet, but this moment, this terrible and beautiful moment by the river, was the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The emergency room was a controlled chaos of beeping monitors, rushing feet, and the sharp antiseptic smell that Sarah remembered all too well from her nursing days. She sat on an examination table in a curtained-off area, Maya asleep in a hospital bassinet beside her, while a young resident cleaned and resutured her C-section incision. "You're lucky," the doctor said, though her tone suggested she thought Sarah was anything but. "The tear wasn't as deep as it could have been. But Miss Chun, you're 3 weeks postpartum. What were you thinking, jumping into a river?" Sarah winced as the needle pierced her skin. A child was drowning. The resident paused, her expression softening slightly. "The little boy they brought in with you? I heard he's stable. You saved his life. Is he okay? Really okay?" Sarah had been asking everyone who came near her curtain, but no one had given her a straight answer yet. "I'm not on his case, but I heard them say his oxygen levels are good. They're keeping him for observation, standard procedure for submersion incidents, but the prognosis is excellent." The doctor tied off the last stitch. "Thanks to you." Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "And what about me? When can I go home?" The resident's expression turned serious. "Ms. Chun, you've just had surgery redone. You need to stay for observation at least overnight. You're anemic, exhausted, and you've been through significant trauma. If you were any other patient, I'd be recommending 3 days minimum." "I can't afford," Sarah started, then stopped. She couldn't afford a lot of things. Couldn't afford the ambulance ride she'd just taken. Couldn't afford an overnight hospital stay. Couldn't afford the medical bills that were already piling up from Maya's delivery. "I'll be fine at home." "You have a newborn to care for," the doctor pointed out. "You need to be healthy for her. Let's keep you overnight, make sure you're stable, get some fluids, and iron into you. Is there someone who can help you with the baby?" Sarah looked down at her hands.
No.
"It's just us." The doctor's expression became sympathetic. "All the more reason to let us take care of you now while we can." She made a note on her chart. "I'm putting you down for an overnight stay. We'll get you set up in a room, and the nurses can help with the baby if you need rest." Before Sarah could argue further, the curtain pulled back. A nurse stepped in, followed by Marcus Wellington. He'd changed out of his wet clothes into hospital scrubs that somehow still managed to look expensive on him. His hair was drying in dark waves, and in the fluorescent lighting, Sarah could see the fine lines of stress around his eyes. Despite the casual clothing, there was something about him that radiated authority and wealth. The way he carried himself, the expensive watch that had survived the river, the immediate deference the nurse showed him. "Miss Chun," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to check on you and thank you properly. How's Ethan?" Sarah asked immediately. Marcus's face transformed, tension easing into relief. "He's going to be fine. They're keeping him overnight for observation, but the doctors say there's no water in his lungs, no signs of secondary drowning. His oxygen levels are perfect. He's already asking for apple juice and his stuffed elephant." His eyes grew bright. "Because of you. He's alive because of you." Sarah felt her own eyes well up. "I'm so glad. So glad he's okay." Marcus looked at the doctor. "Could we have a moment?" The resident nodded and left, pulling the curtain closed behind her. Marcus moved closer, his eyes taking in the fresh bandage on Sarah's abdomen, the four in her arm, the pale cast of her skin. "They told me what you did to yourself, jumping in so soon after C-section," he said quietly. "The risk you took. Any mother would have." "No," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. "Not everyone would have. You had your own infant to think about. You were recovering from major surgery. You had every reason to wait for someone else, to call for help, to protect yourself and your daughter first. But you didn't hesitate. You saved my son's life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "I want to help you, however I can. Medical bills, anything you need." Sarah stiffened. "I don't want your money. I'm not trying to insult you," Marcus said quickly. You're a single mother with a newborn. I saw your reaction when the doctor mentioned staying overnight. I know what hospital bills look like. Please, let me at least cover the costs of your treatment today. It's the least I can do." Sarah wanted to refuse on principle. She'd spent her whole life taking care of herself, not accepting handouts, maintaining her pride even when it meant going hungry or wearing clothes with holes. But as she looked down at Maya, sleeping peacefully despite everything they'd been through, she felt that pride waver. "Just the medical bills from today," she heard herself say. "Nothing more." Marcus nodded, though something in his expression suggested this wasn't the end of the conversation. "Of course. I'll speak to the billing department." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "Would you like to see him?" He's been asking about the nice lady who pulled him out of the water. I think he'd like to know you're okay." Sarah looked down at herself, bruised, bandaged, wearing a hospital gown. Then she looked at Maya. "I don't want to leave her." "Bring her," Marcus said immediately. "My room is just down the hall. We're in pediatrics, so babies are always welcome." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. The nurse helped her into a wheelchair despite her protests, and Marcus pushed her slowly down the corridor, the bassinet with Maya rolling alongside. Ethan was in a private room that was already filling with expensive-looking toys and flowers. The little boy was sitting up in bed, an oxygen monitor clipped to his finger, looking small and vulnerable in the large hospital bed, but very much alive. When he saw Marcus, his face lit up. "Dada, you're back. I brought someone to see you, buddy," Marcus said, wheeling Sarah closer. "This is the lady who helped you in the water. Her name is Sarah." Ethan's eyes went wide as he looked at Sarah. "You swammed," he said seriously. "You swammed and got me." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I did. And you were very brave." "I go in the water," Ethan said, his lower lip trembling slightly. "Scared." "I know, sweetheart. But you're safe now. You're going to be just fine." Ethan's attention shifted to the bassinet. "Baby, this is my daughter, Maya," Sarah said. "She's very little." "I'm big," Ethan announced. "I'm too." "Despite everything," Sarah laughed. "You are very big compared to her." Marcus was watching this interaction with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. When Ethan yawned hugely, he moved to tuck the blanket around his son. "You need to rest, buddy. The doctors want you to sleep. Stay, Dada." Ethan's eyes were already drooping. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus promised. "I'll be right here." Within minutes, Ethan was asleep, his small chest rising and falling steadily. Marcus stood beside the bed for a long moment, just watching his son breathe, as if he might never take that simple miracle for granted again. "I almost lost him," he said quietly, not looking at Sarah. "I was right there and I couldn't reach him. I'm supposed to protect him from everything, and I couldn't," his voice broke. "You were there in seconds," Sarah said gently. "You did everything you could. Sometimes things happen that are beyond our control." Marcus turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw something she recognized: the terror of single parenthood, the weight of being everything to a small person, the fear that you might not be enough. His mother left when he was 8 months old, Marcus said abruptly. She couldn't handle motherhood, didn't want the responsibility. I've been raising him alone since then, learning as I go, terrified every day that I'm going to fail him somehow. I know that feeling, Sarah said. Maya's father left when I told him I was pregnant. Didn't even stick around to see if I was having a boy or a girl. Marcus met her eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition of shared experience, the knowledge that they were fighting the same battle on different fronts. We're quite a pair, he said with a slight, sad smile. A nurse knocked and entered, carrying a tray. Mr. Wellington, I have Ethan's evening medications. And Miss Chun, we have your room ready whenever you'd like to get settled. Marcus looked at Sarah. Can I walk you to your room? I thought you weren't leaving Ethan? There are 3 nurses within shouting distance, and I'll only be gone 5 minutes, Marcus said. But I'd like to make sure you're settled. Please. Sarah wanted to refuse, to maintain some distance from this man and his obvious wealth and the complicated feelings stirring in her chest. But she was tired, and her body hurt, and something about Marcus Wellington made her feel less alone than she had in months. Okay, she said. Her room was small but clean, with a view of the parking lot and a chair that converted into a small bed. Marcus helped transfer Maya's bassinet while the nurse got Sarah settled into the bed, adjusting the 4 and making notes on her chart. When they were alone, Marcus pulled the visitor's chair close to Sarah's bedside. I meant what I said about wanting to help. And I know you said just today's bills, but he paused, choosing his words carefully. I've been where you are. Maybe not the exact same circumstances, but I know what it's like to be alone with an infant, exhausted, terrified, barely holding it together. I had resources that made it easier. You shouldn't have to do this alone just because you don't. I'm not a charity case, Sarah said, but there was less heat in it than before. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering gratitude. My son is alive because you risked everything. Please, let me do something meaningful to show my appreciation. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. In his eyes, she saw genuine concern, genuine desire to help, with no strings attached. It terrified her, this kindness from a stranger. It would be so easy to lean into it, to accept help, to let someone else carry some of the weight she'd been bearing alone. But she'd learned not to depend on anyone but herself. I'll think about it, she said finally. Marcus nodded, seeming to understand that was all she could offer right now. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Thank you, Sarah. For my son's life. For today. For everything. After he left, Sarah lay in the hospital bed, listening to Maya's soft breathing, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Sarah woke to the sound of Maya's cries and the gentle knock of a nurse entering her room. Sunlight streamed through the window, and for a moment, she was disoriented, forgetting where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The river, the drowning boy, the reopened incision. Good morning, Miss Chun, the nurse said cheerfully. How are you feeling? Sore, Sarah admitted, sitting up carefully and reaching for Maya. Her daughter's face was red with indignation at having to wait even 30 seconds for breakfast. But better. Your labs came back good. Doctor says you can go home this afternoon if you continue to improve. The nurse checked her vitals while Sarah nursed Maya. You had a visitor this morning, but we didn't want to wake you. Mr. Wellington stopped by around 6. He left this for you. She handed Sarah an envelope. Inside was a note written in strong, decisive handwriting. Sarah, Ethan is being discharged this morning. He's asking to say goodbye to you and Maya before we leave. We'll be in our room until around 10 a.m. if you're feeling up to a visit. If not, I understand. Also, I've taken care of your hospital bills as discussed. Please don't argue. You saved my son's life. This is nothing compared to that. Thank you again, Marcus. Sarah stared at the note, emotions warring inside her.
Gratitude, certainly.
Relief that she wouldn't be drowning in medical debt. But also discomfort at being indebted to anyone, even someone as seemingly genuine as Marcus Wellington. Maya finished nursing and let out a satisfied sigh, milk-drunk and content. Sarah held her close, breathing in that perfect baby smell, and made a decision. "Can I get cleaned up?" she asked the nurse. "I'd like to visit the Wellingtons before they leave." An hour later, Sarah had managed a shower, changed into the spare clothes a kind social worker had found for her. Her own were ruined by river water and blood, and was making her way down the hall with Maya in her arms. The social worker had offered her a wheelchair, but Sarah had refused. She needed to prove to herself that she could still walk, still function, still take care of her daughter on her own. Ethan's room was easy to find. She just followed the sound of childish laughter. When she knocked and entered, she found Marcus on the floor building a tower of blocks with Ethan, who looked completely recovered from his ordeal. If not for the hospital gown and the room they were in, no one would know the boy had nearly died less than 24 hours ago. "Sarah?" Marcus stood immediately, his face breaking into a genuine smile that transformed his features from handsome to breathtaking. "You came. How are you feeling?" "Much better. And Ethan looks wonderful." "Lady!" Ethan shouted, abandoning his blocks to run to Sarah. He stopped just short of her, suddenly shy, looking up at her with those big eyes that reminded her so much of Maya's, that universal wonder and trust that small children had. "Hi, Ethan," Sarah said gently. "I'm so happy to see you feeling better. I builded a tower." He pointed proudly at the block construction. "Big tower." "That's amazing," Sarah said, and she meant it. This little boy, so full of life and energy, had been limp and blue in her arms yesterday. The miracle of it hit her afresh, and she had to blink back tears. Marcus saw her expression and gently redirected Ethan. "Buddy, why don't you show Sarah's baby your stuffed elephant? Very carefully, remember what we practiced." Ethan nodded solemnly and retrieved a plush elephant from his hospital bed. He approached Maya with exaggerated caution, holding out the toy. "Baby can see Ephant," he whispered. "That's very kind of you," Sarah said, lowering Maya so Ethan could see her better. "Can you say hello to Maya?" "Hello, Maya," Ethan said seriously. Then to Marcus. "She's sleeping, Dada."
She is.
Babies sleep a lot when they're very small. Sarah watched this interaction, seeing a side of Marcus she hadn't seen before. The gentle father, patient and kind, teaching his son to be thoughtful and careful. It was clear he adored Ethan, clear that despite his wealth and power, this was his whole world. A knock at the door interrupted them. A doctor entered, followed by a nurse with discharge papers. "Mr. Wellington, we're ready to process Ethan's release. Everything looks excellent. I want to see him in my office next week for follow-up, but I don't anticipate any complications." "That's wonderful news," Marcus said, shaking the doctor's hand. "Thank you for everything." The doctor turned to Sarah. "Miss Chun, I've heard what you did yesterday. That was remarkably brave. You saved this young man's life." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "I just did what anyone would." "Not everyone would have," the doctor interrupted gently, echoing Marcus's words from the night before. "You should be proud." After the doctor left, Marcus began gathering Ethan's things, an enormous stuffed elephant, several bags of expensive toys, changes of clothes that probably cost more than Sarah's entire wardrobe. She watched, feeling the vast gulf between their worlds yawn wider with each cashmere baby blanket and designer outfit. "Marcus," she said quietly, "thank you for taking care of my hospital bills. That was incredibly generous. But I think this is probably where we say goodbye." Marcus stopped packing and looked at her. "Why?" "Because we live in different worlds. She gestured at the pile of expensive items. "You're clearly successful, wealthy. I'm a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Yesterday was extraordinary circumstances, but now it's over. You have your son, I have my daughter, and we can both go back to our lives." "What if I don't want it to be over?" Marcus said quietly. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Marcus set down the bag he was holding and moved closer to her. "I mean that I spent all night thinking about what you did. Not just the drowning, though God knows that's enough, but everything. You're 3 weeks postpartum, alone, clearly struggling financially based on your reaction to the hospital bills, and you still jumped into that river without a second thought. You still put another person's child before your own safety. That tells me something about who you are, Sarah Chen." "It tells you I make impulsive decisions," Sarah said, trying to lighten the mood even as her pulse quickened. "It tells me you're extraordinary," Marcus said. "And I'd like to get to know you better." "You and Maya." "Marcus." "I'm not asking for anything romantic," he said quickly. "I know we just met. I know this is unusual. But Ethan and we don't have a lot of people in our lives. My work consumed me for so long, and after his mother left, I pulled back from my social circle. It's been just us for over a year. And yesterday, watching you with him, seeing you with Maya, I thought, maybe we don't have to be so alone." Sarah wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself and Maya from the inevitable disappointment when this wealthy man realized how little she had to offer. Wanted to avoid the heartbreak that would come when he moved on to his real life and forgot all about the woman from the river. But Ethan chose that moment to tug on her sleeve. "Lady, come see my house?" he asked hopefully. "Got toys. And a pool. But not the Badwater pool," he added seriously. "The safe pool with data." Sarah looked down at those hopeful eyes, then up at Marcus's equally hopeful expression, and felt her resolve crumbling. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I have a lot going on. Maya needs so much, and I'm still recovering, and I'm starting back to work next week." "Where do you work?" Marcus asked. "Riverside diner. Night shift, 6 to midnight. My neighbor watches Maya, though I hate leaving her." Sarah stopped, wondering why she was telling him all this. Marcus's expression became thoughtful. "What did you do before Maya?" "I was a pediatric nurse. But I had to leave my job when I got pregnant. Couldn't afford childcare on my salary, and the hours were impossible for a single parent." She laughed bitterly. "Ironic, isn't it? I spent years taking care of other people's children, and now I can't afford to let someone take care of mine while I work." "That is ironic," Marcus said quietly. "And wrong. You're clearly talented. You saved Ethan's life with textbook-perfect CPR. You should be using those skills." "Should be doesn't pay the bills." "No, but maybe I can help with that too." Sarah stiffened. "I told you, I'm not a charity case." "Hear me out," Marcus said, holding up his hands. "What if I offered you a job? A real job, not charity. I need a nanny for Ethan. Someone with medical training, someone I can trust completely. The woman I have now is nice but inexperienced, and after yesterday," his voice roughened. "After yesterday, I realized how vulnerable he is. How much I need someone who knows what to do in an emergency." Sarah stared at him. "You want me to be Ethan's nanny?" "I want you to consider it. The pay would be competitive, more than you're making at the diner. You could bring Maya with you. We have a nursery that's sitting empty. It could be hers. You'd have your own space, privacy, but help when you need it. I have a housekeeper, a chef, people who could support you while you're still recovering. Marcus, that's too much. Is it? Marcus moved closer. Sarah, I watched you save my son's life. I saw you jump into that river knowing you might not make it out. I saw you resuscitate him with professional skill while you were bleeding and exhausted. I know what you're worth, even if you don't. Let me pay you what you're worth. Let me give you and Maya the support you deserve. Sarah felt tears building. It was too much, the offer, the kindness, the recognition. She'd been invisible for so long, struggling alone, and suddenly this stranger was seeing her, really seeing her. I don't know if I can accept this, she whispered. Will you at least think about it? Marcus asked. Come to the house.
See the space.
Meet the current nanny and the staff. No commitment. Just consider it. Sarah looked down at Maya, sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought about the diner shifts, the exhaustion, the constant worry about money and medical bills, and whether she was giving her daughter enough. She thought about her nursing skills going to waste, about the career she'd loved and lost. And she thought about Ethan, this sweet little boy who had already found a place in her heart, and Marcus, this complicated man who wore loneliness like a second skin despite all his wealth. I'll think about it, she heard herself say. Marcus's smile was like the sun coming out. That's all I ask. 3 days later, Sarah stood outside the Wellington estate with Maya in her carrier and a diaper bag over her shoulder, questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. The house, mansion really, sprawled before her like something from a magazine, all modern glass and stone and manicured gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. This was a mistake. She didn't belong here. Before she could turn around and leave, the front door opened. Marcus appeared, wearing jeans and a simple black t-shirt that somehow looked more expensive than anything Sarah owned. Ethan was attached to his leg, peeking out shyly. Sarah, you came. Marcus's relief was evident. I was worried you might change your mind. I almost did, Sarah admitted. This is a lot. It's just a house, Marcus said, though they both knew that was an understatement. Come in.
Please.
Let me show you around. Introduce you to everyone. Sarah followed him inside, her eyes widening despite her determination not to be impressed. The foyer alone was larger than her entire apartment, with soaring ceilings and artwork that was probably worth more than she'd make in 10 years. Lady, Ethan had found his courage and was tugging on Sarah's hand. Come see my room. Got trains. In a minute, buddy, Marcus said gently. Let's let Sarah get settled first. She brought Maya to play with you. Baby Maya. Ethan's eyes lit up. Marcus led them through the house, pointing out rooms casually. The kitchen. Chef Margarita makes incredible food, and she's already excited about the possibility of having a baby in the house. The library, feel free to use it any time. A media room, a gym, and finally, the wing that housed Ethan's room and the nursery. The nursery took Sarah's breath away. It was painted a soft sage green with cream accents, filled with beautiful furniture. A crib that looked like it had never been used, a rocking chair positioned by the window, shelves full of books and toys. Everything was high quality but tasteful, clearly decorated with love and care. This was supposed to be for Ethan's younger sibling, Marcus said quietly. My ex-wife was pregnant when we married, but she terminated the pregnancy without telling me. Said she'd change her mind about wanting another child. It was the beginning of the end of our marriage. He touched the crib gently. I've never had the heart to dismantle it, but maybe it was waiting for Maya. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She carefully lowered Maya into the crib, and her daughter stretched and settled as if she'd always belonged there. There's a bedroom attached, Marcus continued, opening a door to reveal a beautiful room with a queen bed, its own bathroom, and large windows overlooking the garden.
For you.
If you take the position, you'd have complete privacy, your own space. The staff knows to respect boundaries. Marcus, this is too much. Is it? He turned to face her. Sarah, let me tell you what I'm offering. $60,000 a year, plus room and board if you choose to live here. Full health insurance for you and Maya. Paid vacation. Flexible hours because I work from home most days. Bonuses for exceptional care. And, most importantly, a safe, stable environment for your daughter while you work. Sarah did the math in her head. $60,000. She currently made barely $22,000 at the diner. With health insurance, room and board, and the ability to have Maya with her, it was life-changing. It was impossible. Why? She asked. Why me? You could hire anyone. Someone with more experience, better credentials. You jumped into a river to save my son, Marcus said simply. Everything else is just details. I trust you, Sarah.
Completely.
Do you know how rare that is? Sarah looked around the beautiful nursery, then down at Maya sleeping peacefully in the expensive crib. She thought about her cramped apartment with its peeling paint and broken heater. She thought about night shifts at the diner, coming home exhausted to take care of Maya alone. She thought about her dreams of using her nursing skills again, of providing better for her daughter. And she thought about the fear of depending on someone, of being let down, of letting herself hope for something better only to have it taken away. Can I have a few days to think about it? She asked. Of course, Marcus said. But while you're here, let me introduce you to the current nanny. She's wonderful, but she's going back to school and giving notice anyway. I'd love your opinion on whether you'd feel comfortable working with the existing staff. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah met the household team. Chef Margarita, a warm Italian woman in her 50s who immediately cooed over Maya and promised to make traditional nursing teas. Housekeepers Anna and Rosa, sisters from the Philippines who were professional and kind. And Jennifer, the current nanny, a college student who clearly loved Ethan but admitted she was overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for the son of a billionaire. He needs someone with real experience, Jennifer told Sarah privately. Someone who knows what to do in emergencies. I panic if he gets a splinter. You saved his life. You're exactly what he needs. By the time Sarah left, her head was spinning. Marcus walked her to her car, a 15-year-old Honda that looked pathetically out of place in the circular driveway next to his Mercedes and Tesla. Thank you for coming, he said. I know this is overwhelming. But Sarah, I meant what I said about trusting you. After what you did at the river, I'd trust you with Ethan's life. There's no higher recommendation I could give anyone. Sarah buckled Maya into her car seat, then turned to face him. I need to understand something. Is this really just about Ethan? Or is there something else you're hoping for? Marcus met her eyes steadily. Right now, this is about giving my son the best care possible and giving you an opportunity you deserve. If over time friendship develops between our families, between us, I wouldn't object to that. But I'm not hiring you with expectations of anything beyond professional excellence. I'm not that kind of man, and you're not that kind of woman. Sarah believed him. Against all her instincts, against all her experience with men who said one thing and wanted another, she believed Marcus Wellington was sincere. I'll give you my answer in 3 days, she said. That's all I ask. Sarah drove away, glancing in her rearview mirror to see Marcus standing in the driveway, Ethan in his arms, both of them waving goodbye. The image stayed with her all the way back to her apartment, through the evening routine with Maya, through the long night shift at the diner where she moved through the motions on autopilot. That night, after her shift, Sarah stood in her tiny apartment with its stained carpet and broken heater, holding Maya in her arms. She'd been so determined to make it on her own, to prove she didn't need anyone. But as she looked at her daughter's perfect face, she realized that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Maya deserved better than this apartment. Better than a mother exhausted from double shifts and recovering from surgery. Better than the constant stress and worry that came with living paycheck to paycheck. And maybe, just maybe, Sarah deserved better too. She picked up her phone and texted the number Marcus had given her. "I'd like to accept the position. When would you like me to start?" The response came within minutes. "Tomorrow?
Today?
Whenever you're ready." And Sarah, "Thank you. You won't regret this." Sarah looked around her apartment one more time. Then she started packing. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of the Wellington estate, watching through the window as Marcus and Ethan played in the garden. It was a scene that had become comfortingly familiar, the man and his son, completely engrossed in whatever game they'd invented, both of them laughing without restraint. Maya was in her high chair beside Sarah, making a delighted mess of the pureed sweet potato margarita had made fresh that morning. At 8 months old, she was thriving, chubby-cheeked and happy, developing right on schedule, with no memory of the tiny apartment or the stress-filled early days of her life. "They look happy," Margarita observed, bringing Sarah a cup of tea without being asked. Over the past 6 months, the chef had become something of a surrogate mother to Sarah, offering advice and comfort, and occasionally stern words when Sarah pushed herself too hard. "They do," Sarah agreed. And they did. Ethan had blossomed under Sarah's care, his vocabulary expanding daily, his confidence growing, his occasional nightmares about water fading as she patiently helped him process the trauma of the drowning. But it was Marcus's transformation that struck Sarah most deeply. The tense, lonely man she'd met at the hospital had gradually relaxed, smiling more, laughing more, joining his son in play rather than watching from the sidelines. He still worked hard. Conference calls and business meetings were a daily occurrence, but he'd found a better balance, present for Ethan in ways he admitted he hadn't been before. And somewhere along the way, without either of them quite meaning for it to happen, Marcus and Sarah had become friends. It had started simply. Late-night conversations when Ethan had a nightmare and Sarah came to help. Marcus making breakfast for Sarah when she overslept after being up with Maya. Shared laughter over Ethan's latest precocious question. Working together to childproof the pool area so Ethan could overcome his fear of water with support rather than avoidance. Then the conversations deepened. Marcus sharing his fears about failing Ethan, about the damage his ex-wife's abandonment might have caused. Sarah admitting her terror that she wasn't enough for Maya, that her daughter deserved more than a mother who was still figuring everything out. Both of them revealing the loneliness that came with single parenthood, the weight of being everything to a small person with no one to share the burden. "Sarah?" Marcus's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He'd come in from the garden with Ethan on his shoulders, both of them windblown and grinning. "We have a question for you." "Oh." Sarah wiped sweet potato from Maya's chin. Ethan looked very serious. "Can Sarah come to the beach with us? Please? She never goes nowhere fun." Sarah laughed. "I go places. You go to the grocery store and the pediatrician," Marcus said with a smile. "Ethan's not wrong. When's the last time you did something just for fun?" Sarah couldn't remember. Even before Maya, between work and pregnancy and stress, fun had been a luxury she couldn't afford, temporally or financially.
"I'm working," she pointed out.
"It's Saturday," Marcus countered. "You get weekends off unless I specifically need you, which I don't."
"So, beach?"
"I have a house in Malibu. We could drive up, spend the day, let the kids play in the sand. What do you say?" Sarah hesitated. Over the past 6 months, she'd been careful to maintain professional boundaries, even as their friendship deepened. The beach felt personal. It felt like something a family would do together. But then Maya let out a delighted squeal, and Ethan was looking at her with those big, hopeful eyes, and Marcus's expression was so open and genuine that Sarah felt her resistance crumble. "Okay," she said. "The beach sounds wonderful." Marcus's smile could have lit up the entire house. They left an hour later in Marcus's Range Rover, the back seat full of children and beach toys and coolers packed by Margarita. Sarah tried not to notice how natural it felt, how easy, to slip into this routine with Marcus. Tried not to think about how Ethan had started calling her Miss Sarah with the same affection he reserved for his father. Tried not to acknowledge the way her heart skipped when Marcus laughed at something she said. The Malibu house was, predictably, stunning, all windows and ocean views and expensive minimalism. But what made Sarah catch her breath was the way Marcus had prepared for them. There was a portable crib set up for Maya, a high chair in the kitchen, beach toys clearly purchased specifically for this trip. "You planned this," she said. "I hoped you'd say yes," Marcus admitted. "I wanted everything to be ready if you did." They spent the afternoon on the private beach, building sandcastles with Ethan, letting Maya feel the ocean spray on her toes, which she found alternately fascinating and alarming, eating lunch on a blanket while seagulls circled hopefully overhead. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, the children fell asleep. Maya in her portable bassinet in the shade, Ethan curled up on a beach towel between Sarah and Marcus. "Thank you for this," Sarah said quietly, watching the waves. "For all of it. The job, the support, She gestured at the sleeping children. "The family. That's what this feels like, isn't it?" Marcus said. "A family." Sarah's breath caught. They'd both been so careful not to name it, this thing growing between them. But there it was, spoken aloud, impossible to ignore. "Marcus. I know we said we'd keep this professional," he continued, turning to face her. The setting sun illuminated his features, highlighting the vulnerability in his expression. "I know we both have reasons to be cautious. But Sarah, these past 6 months have been the happiest of my life since Ethan was born. And it's not just because you're wonderful with him, though you are. It's because you're wonderful. Period." "I work for you," Sarah said, even as her heart raced. "That complicates things." "Then I'll fire you," Marcus said with a slight smile. "And hire a different nanny." "I don't care about the logistics, Sarah. I care about you. About us. About the possibility that maybe we don't have to be alone anymore." Sarah looked at him. This man who had been a stranger 6 months ago, who had become her employer, her friend, and somewhere along the way, so much more. She thought about all her reasons for saying no, for protecting herself, for maintaining distance. And then she thought about Ethan's laugh and Marcus's smile, and the way he made her feel seen and valued in ways she'd never experienced before. She thought about Maya, thriving in an environment of love and security. She thought about the family they'd accidentally created, and how right it felt. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've been let down before. Maya's father, my own family. I learned not to depend on anyone." "I know," Marcus said gently. "My ex-wife destroyed my ability to trust easily. But Sarah, what you did at that river, you showed me what real courage looks like. You jumped in without hesitation to save someone else's child. Can't you be that brave for yourself? For us?" Sarah felt tears building. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? Marcus countered. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently. "Sarah Chun, you saved my son's life. Let me spend the rest of mine showing you how grateful I am that you exist." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand, the sincerity in his words, the rightness of this moment. When she opened them again, She saw only honesty and hope and love in Marcus's expression. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's be brave together." Marcus's kiss was gentle, reverent, full of promise. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling through tears. "Does this mean you're my girlfriend?" Marcus asked with mock seriousness. "I think it means we're figuring this out as we go," Sarah said. "Together." "Together," Marcus agreed. "I like the sound of that." Ethan stirred between them, his eyes fluttering open. "Miss Sarah kissed Dada," he announced sleepily. Sarah laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I did. Is that okay with you?" Ethan considered this seriously. Then he sat up and threw his arms around both of them. "We're family now," he asked hopefully. Marcus looked at Sarah, his eyes bright. "What do you think? Are we a family?" Sarah looked at Ethan's hopeful face, at Maya sleeping peacefully nearby, at Marcus with all his love and vulnerability on display. She thought about the river, about the choice she'd made without hesitation to save a stranger's child. She thought about all the choices since then, each one leading her here, to this moment, to this makeshift family built on courage and need and unexpected love. "Yes," she said firmly. "We're a family." Ethan cheered, and Maya woke up with a startled cry that turned into a laugh when she saw all the faces smiling down at her. Marcus pulled them all close, Sarah, Ethan, Maya, and in that moment, on that beach with the sun setting behind them, they were complete. Sarah had jumped into a river to save a drowning boy, not knowing he was a billionaire's son. But she'd gained so much more than gratitude. She'd found a home. She'd found a partner. She'd found proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be saved too. 6 months later, Sarah stood in that same spot on the beach, but this time wearing a simple white dress, with Maya as her flower girl and Ethan as the ring bearer. As Marcus slipped a ring on her finger and promised to love her and Maya for the rest of his life, Sarah finally understood that she'd been drowning too, in loneliness, in struggle, in the weight of doing everything alone. And Marcus Wellington, the man whose son she'd saved, had dove into her life and pulled her to safety. "I love you," Marcus whispered as they sealed their vows with a kiss. "I love you too," Sarah whispered back. "Thank you for saving me." "No," Marcus said, pulling back to look into her eyes, his own glistening with happy tears. "Thank you for saving all of us." As they walked back up the beach toward their future, children in their arms and families surrounding them, Sarah felt the last of her fear wash away like footprints in the sand. She'd been so afraid to trust, to hope, to believe in happy endings. But sometimes, she'd learned, the best stories begin with an act of courage, a leap into unknown waters, a willingness to risk everything for someone else. Sometimes the best love stories start not with a meet-cute or love at first sight, but with a choice to be brave when everything tells you to protect yourself. Sarah had jumped into a river to save a stranger's child, and in doing so, she'd saved herself. The end.